What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Alrighty. Aloha, y'all. Welcome to the show. I am Daniel Aaron, your host. This is the Art of Vibrant Living show. And oh my goodness, we have a great show today. I'll tell you about that in a moment. First, though, it is my sacred duty and honor to encourage you to get the most out of this. As in, yes, please be entertained, be inspired. Most of all, though, be empowered and empower yourself by taking some action. As in, our guest today is going to bring you gold. It's up to you, though, to take some of that, put it in your pocket, and then put it into place in your life. So try it out, put it into action. And would you do that? Beyond that, if you are already living the most vibrant, thriving life you possibly could, awesome, good on you. I would love to have you as a guest on the show. I think, though, there's more possible. And in either case, if you would like some support, if you'd like to connect, I would love to connect with you. Let's have a conversation. Send me an email, daniel@danielaaron.com. And let's get into the show today. My guest today is Marilyn Horowitz. She is an award-winning author. She has taught her trademark storytelling method at New York University for 25 years. She's got 2 new books out. One has an amazing process that's part of it, a journaling practice, which is, as some of y'all know, a core part of what I teach and share also. So I'm doubly excited to speak with her about this. Plus, her other most recent book, co-authored with world-famous clairvoyant Martin Sherlock, shares a 3-year journey to self-awareness. Fascinating story that is. Hopefully we will have time to talk about that too. She's got a couple of novels also, and we could keep talking about all her accolades. However, I'd rather introduce you. So, Marilyn, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm super glad you are here. And let's see. Now, since I have the wonderful advantage of knowing you just a little bit prior to us getting here live, I wonder if you would be so kind as to share with our audience a little bit about what got you to this cool point in your life as an award-winning author and guide.
Well, it's a pretty good story. There's so many. I'm a storyteller, so you push the button. I could go on for 3 hours, but I'll keep it very condensed. So I went to film school. I went to NYU Film School. I made a film. I sold my film. I thought I was very fancy. I wrote a novel, went to a party. At that point, I was single, and some guy was flirting with me. And he said, "Hey, baby, my best friend's a Hollywood producer." And I was like, "Yeah, right," but he was. So I finished my novel. This is my first novel. On a Friday, I went to the party on Saturday, and I sold the book to the movies on Monday. Sounds like the world's greatest thing that ever happened, right? Well, the producer was quite a piece of work. And this was a whodunit about a serial killer and his sister. By the time I finished working with this guy, it was a whodunit, and you saw the whole point of my story, which is how violence evolves in the family for 5 seconds. It became a real potboiler. I mean, it was still pretty good, but it was not anything. And he hated my work, or he was jealous or whatever. And he's like, "Okay, I'm taking it away from you. If you don't turn in what I want tomorrow morning, we're done." I was hysterical. I had a dream, and Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, appeared in my dream. And he was up a tree wearing a toga, and he was eating an apple. And he said, "So, Marilyn, I'm where you are. Metaphorically, how can I help you?" And I'm a New Yorker, so I kind of went, okay, what do I do worse than writing? I might as well just dig my grave and just jump into it. So I said, Send me a map, because I can't read maps. So he says, are you sure? I said, sure. It's too late now. I wake up, I scribble down these 12 circles, which you can see in my book, How to Write a Screenplay in 10 Weeks, which is a book I wrote a long time ago. My trademark method is in there. It's a picture of this map. And it turned out to be a simplified version of his 17-part hero's journey. And when I started to examine it, I come from a movie business background. My father and my grandfather were both general counsel of Columbia Pictures. So I have that awareness, and we grew up watching movies and knowing directors and stuff. And I went, whoa, this is the exact structure of a traditional American narrative film, which is all the stuff of my father and my grandfather. And I went, this is crazy. Because then I realized, because I was already studying consciousness, I practiced Kundalini yoga for 9 years, all these things. I went, wait, this is how we organize our reality. Because I'd read a lot of books on consciousness, and I went, this is an amazing map. It goes both ways. It works both ways. I was like, wow, this is cool. So the way things work out is, somehow I got a job teaching. Somehow people found me. NYU called me. They said, we hear you have this book, which is a bunch of handouts, scribblings of this thing. My then husband was a filmmaker who also worked as a temp, doing the pitch books for banks. He took all my little scribble things, turned it into a book, and voila, I was teaching at NYU professional studies and also at grad school, where I both taught for a long time. So that's the origin story of this. And then during the pandemic, my hobby was teaching. I have to say that as an aside. My actual work was as a writing coach. Somehow I was discovered, and I worked on thousands of projects. People have won awards, movies, books, whatever. And, writers, as you know, being one, we shelter in place anyway. I mean, the pandemic was not news, right? However, everybody was home with us. And that was crazy making. One of my friends reported, she said, I couldn't help myself. My husband was there, and I looked at him and I said, do you have to breathe so loud? I'm trying to write. And I thought, okay, there's a need. So I began to have these free podcasts every other week. I think it was every other week for a while. And they taught these techniques. And Word of the Day was a technique that I'd used in my private practice for a long time, but it never occurred to me to use it in a more generalized sense to help people feel better. And it was highly effective. And then once the pandemic ended, I was encouraged to write a book by an English publisher who actually published the book in their spiritual imprint. And then I went to Burning Man, if you've heard of Burning Man, which is quite a place to go. And my friend who I danced tango with said to me, you're not a teacher, Marilyn, you're a healer. I dare you. So there I was in the desert. And then he's a shamanic, he's a professor of shamanism at Gallatin. There I am under a dome in a dust storm in Burning Man, and everybody's got their drums and their rattles and their sage. I had my notebook and my phone. I'm going, So the purpose of this camp is a camp where after everybody has their transformative experiences and they have to come down, they come here to be healed by the healers, because everybody's had a big transformation. So I get this big, beautiful, hysterical woman. And I say, if emotions go to 1 to 10, she was a 12. She was hysterical. And I'm trained in all these somatic modalities. So I thought, oh, okay, looks to me like her head's off her shoulders. So I said, okay, sit down. I think her name was Tova. I said, Tova, sit down. And I just did a little, I don't know if you've studied Alexander technique, but one of the things is that, you do this thing called the scratch. You kind of get your head back on. So I literally put her head back on her shoulders. And I thought, oh, I'm doing great. So she went from a 12 to a 6. And then I said, what is the problem that you're having? She was too hysterical to talk. I thought, oh my God. And these sessions were like 15 minutes, and I thought, I'm going to fail. Barnaby's going to be disappointed. So I got out my little notebook and I said, just sob out a word. She said, betray. I went, great. Give me another. And here's come, my father. And 3 or 4 more words. And I said, okay, so what I'm getting from this is that somehow your father betrayed you. She stopped crying. She leaned forward. She straightened up and she said, no, it's my boyfriend. We got here and he's sleeping with my best friend. And I put up with it because my father did that to my mother and I'm not doing it. She got up, did a little more massage, whoosh, saw her at a party about a week later, and she's like, he's gone. I'm a writing teacher. I'm sitting there going, holy cow, like wow, Barnaby was right. So then I did it 30 more times, and after that I thought, yeah, I got something here. And then when the publisher put the book under, if you go look it up, it's an English publisher. They have 5 imprints. They have personal growth, they have writing, they have spirituality. They put my book in spirituality, and they said, we want it to be like the next Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. I'm still recovering from that accolade. That's one of the nicest things I ever heard in my entire life. And so that's the lineage. And so now what happened was I started to use it more widely. I have a friend who's a psychoanalyst who started using my techniques with his immigrant Spanish population who live in shelters. And he had a client who had been in an abusive marriage for 15 years and a 7-year-old boy. They couldn't get her to leave. That's what this not-for-profit does. They find new homes and they get bad people away from, good people away from bad people. And he had the session with her and he was like, okay, this is going to go as usual, blah, blah, blah. He did the self-hug with her, which will hopefully you'll allow me to try and experiment with you shortly. And she cried. She had clearly never connected with herself. And then they had the session, did it again. Next day he gets a call saying, I'm at the police station. Can you come and help me sign the restraining papers? I'm leaving my husband. And she did, and she has. And it's 6 months later, and she has a new life with her son. I'm still sitting here gobsmacked. I mean, for all the writers I've helped, honestly, to help one person in a really treacherous life situation, and I'll stop talking now, but you get it. It's like, wow.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's great. What an amazing journey you've had. And there's so much that we could dive into from what you spoke about. I've got 223 questions that came to me. And yes, it's true. I am also a longtime writer and author. And so there's a part of me would love to dive into the more writerly questions. And given that this show is the art of vibrant living, let's stay on the side of a little bit more how writing can be directly useful to people having their most beautiful, amazing, vibrant, healthy, thriving lives. And I love what you shared about about the genesis of this practice and how that happened. And I'll interject by saying too that for me, it was writing that really opened the door for me to my own subconscious, to feelings. I didn't even know there was a thing called emotions prior to writing. And it was really the precursor to a spiritual awakening for me. And I use the word precursor, I guess, in a specific way. And I'm curious for you if this relates to your experience with the practice that you discovered here, which is one of the things, and hey, we can, look to Julia Cameron too. One of the beautiful things that she helps so many people do is create a flow, right? And that's part of the Morning Papers project, right? And if anybody doesn't know that, that's just a practice of writing 3 pages, stream of consciousness every morning.
Yes.
And my experience of that, one of the things it does is it gets stuff out of us, right? It gets things moving, which then allows for movement inside. This might be a little bit airy-fairy for folks, but it allows for spirit to pour in.
Exactly.
So what's your sense, Marilyn, of how that practice works, and what is the relationship between writing and consciousness, writing and spirit, writing and vibrant living?
Well, I mean, since we're in the spiritual mode, remember, from the Bible, in the beginning was the Word, right? And the Word was God. So the way that I would process what you said is that having studied consciousness and having studied sociology and many other things, what we learn from all these different modalities is once people feel safe, in the sense of survival, food, water, shelter, the next impulse, the most fundamental impulse, is to make meaning, right? Cave paintings, petroglyphs, everything. And so because we're a literate society, the word is our paintbrush, our chisel. And so, little kids, the first thing they do is they want to say words. And so, I'm a big fan of Julia Cameron. You can tell I'm sort of one of these encyclopedic people. So when I'm going to study consciousness, I read everything. If I'm going to study journalist practice, I do everything. I'm very thorough. But this thing that I learned, which I got in a dream, again, my dreams seem to be a very reliable source of good content, was this idea, I was working on a particular study of the brain and how the eyes and the brain go together. And I discovered, and I would teach this thing where I would have people gather. I call it a gathering, stirring. And people would have me come into their religious groups, like the Buddhist or whatever, when they're doing Zazen. I'm a spiritual person. And we would stand there for 3 or 4 minutes doing the stirring thing, and people would be like, wait, this is crazy. How do you do this? How did you get this whole room to just, and just, just zone in and connect. And I thought, I have no idea, but I'm a writer. I'm going to do this on paper. And that's how I came up with the idea of having people draw the circle, which is the word of the day, central theme. And then you draw, you see how my hand's moving? You draw circles. I'm moving in a specific fashion. Then you direct them with a line. Each one of these movements does something and moves your brain chemistry around. And what it does is it gets you right into that in Tao Yin yoga, which is Taoist yoga, which I'm trained in. They call it the crystal palace. In the middle of your head is a place where there are 4 glands, including the pineal gland, which is the seat of the soul. And there's something about the way the brain chemicals move when you do this that puts you right into that place that you're talking about. It puts you right in the center of your subconscious right away, at will, because you feel like it. And once I discovered this, one of the reasons that I've been so successful as a coach is that my accelerated writing system, which is, write a screenplay in 10 weeks, for a professional became write a draft in 5 weeks, because we could access this intensely creative part of this people in a literary way. In other words, it came out in words. That whole part of the brain only works in pictures, which is why it's hard to tell your dreams and why people write messy drafts and it's hard to organize them. None of my students had this trouble because this technique was self-organizing. Because in some way, time exists so that we run away from the bear before it catches us, not after. Time is a biological imperative that we have. On the creative part of the brain, it doesn't exist because it's not relevant. We're not trying to get away from something. But that's why it's so hard to tell stories. Something about this technique, and even do it in the air, Daniel, if you feel like it, you'll see your brain kind of does something. You'll feel your brain kind of going, whoosh, whoosh. Just do it a few times and you'll start to see and breathe as we're sitting here. Do you feel that sort of coherence and that there's kind of like aha? I see you. I see your aura changing as we're sitting here. How cool is that? So imagine now you write this down and you say, okay, what's a word that I need to work on, or what I'm developing are workbooks. Like, for example, for this social working population, it's a list of 30 prompts because it's a 30-day practice. The book is called How to Transform Your Writing in 15 Minutes a Day. It's a 30-day practice. And each morning you do this little hug and then you take a breath and you're not doing this out in the air. You're now doing this on a piece of paper where you're drawing these circles. And then you say, what do I need to work on? And as I say, the most amazing thing is you're in direct contact with your subconscious, but you're doing this in the language. Now, you know exactly how amazing that is because you do it all the time, but you have to have the translation process because it comes in an image and then it has to go in words. Something's lost there.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you. Let me backtrack us a little bit and make sure I'm understanding, because I would love for everybody to get this really clearly. And if there's anything that you might be able to turn off that's making sounds, that could be good for us also. Yeah. And so what I understood you say in the process is it starts with like a hug or some self-soothing, which is, I imagine, go ahead. You want to say something on that?
Specific, could we do an experiment? I don't mean to interrupt your flow.
No, please.
Okay, this will help a lot. Okay, so here's the actual thing that we do. Okay, it's an experiment. You'll see how you feel about it. It's kind of hokey and a little cheesy, but go with me, okay?
Perfect.
All right, so now you're gonna do 2 things. You're gonna sit up in your chair and get on your sit bones. Okay, so you have a good flow. Take a couple of breaths, roll your shoulders, just get very physically present. Okay, and now you're gonna put your hands up above your head. And if you're at home and you feel like doing this, it's really fun. And then as you relax your hands, you're going to exhale and you're going to imagine that you're carving out a nice bubble around yourself. So no internet can get in, no one can bother you. You get to be in this beautiful space. It can be like a beach or a forest, but you are with yourself. Okay, you feel that? I can see it in your eyes. And then you do that again, and then you bring that and you put your hands on your shoulders very gently. And you breathe again, inhale for 4. Exhale. Give yourself a squeeze. Drop your chin just a tad. Relax. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, now you're going to close your eyes and look at yourself in the Zoom. If you're doing this at home, Don't use his name. You're going to use your name. But what you're going to say is, I love you, your name. Take a breath. Give yourself this breathe. Go on.
I love you, Daniel.
We'll always be together.
We'll always be together.
Breathe, and we'll always be safe.
And we'll always be safe.
And we are enough.
And we are enough.
And then take a breath. And you see how that feels? Everybody there at home, isn't that a great feeling? Now, what I discovered after doing this with thousands of people is that this is actually what happiness is. This feeling of self-connection is the actual working definition of the word happiness. And this is the other part of the practice. It is so important because you can do this for yourself anytime. You can literally make yourself happy anytime. And you don't have to go through all the elaborate thing of sitting everywhere. Just go to the restroom and you're in a bad meeting, put your hand on your shoulders, look in the mirror, and even if you hate yourself, say, I love you. Just get it. Make sure you have a big fake smile because that's what sends the brain chemicals up. And then just take a breath. And from there, it's being centered, but Daniel, you can tell I'm pretty encyclopedic. I don't settle for just centered. That's not good enough for me. I want to know the pinpoint of this thing. And the pinpoint, I'm sorry, there's someone at my door. I have no idea what to do. Can you hang on?
Oh, okay. Okay, well, we're going to...
Hang on, stay there.
So I'll take over for a minute with y'all while Marilyn's attending to what she needs to attend to. And the power of writing to access the subconscious is tremendous. It really is. And I won't tell the story now, but another time, or if you want to hear more, I'll share about how impactful writing was for me as part of my journey. So, all right, well, let's see. We got Marilyn's back with us.
I'm sorry. I live in a brownstone in New York, and I'm basically the ipso facto super. So Amazon rings my bell, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm sorry to the audience.
That's all right. We're back, and you were talking about being encyclopedic and centered is not good enough.
Let me just make the point. The point is, I wanted to know what happiness was. Gosh darn it! I was tired of reading, and I've read thousands, or skimmed, let's say, thousands. We all have. We've all read lots of books about happiness. And I just got to a point where I'm like, you know what? And because remember I told you I've studied consciousness, I've done a lot of research. I thought there is a feeling that is happiness. This is not a movable feast. That there is a thing in there. And this is the thing. When you're in the hug, and you have that feeling with yourself, my experience after doing all this work is that is happiness. And there are so many other feelings, which are all beautiful. But this way, when someone tells me something about happiness, I can come from a place of, I know, this is power. I know how to make myself happy. And I'm in control. And whatever you say about happiness can be great. But I know who I am in this happy place. I know who I am. I'm in control of it. And I can give it to myself anytime I want. Power. Now, that's the point of my telling the story. Now, I'm dying to know how writing was impactful for you. Please tell us.
Oh, well, thank you. And I love part of your process there in the self-love component. That's something that we've spoken about on this show several times. In fact, author friend of mine wrote a book on how to love oneself, and we spoke about that maybe a month ago. So I love that that's a part of the process. And let's take it to the next step, though. So we've done this beyond centering. We've created happiness. We've had the hug. Then what's the next part, Marilyn?
Well, this is the writing part. Now, again, I told you I'm developing a manual for this population that are not writers. So you can do this process mentally as well as writers. But what we discovered is everybody wants to write. I sort of found a way for people to not write, but everybody wants to. So if you're at home and you can get a piece of paper and put a big circle in the middle and put a few circles around it, we can do this. And Daniel, if you want to again conduct an experiment, you could try this.
Yeah, sure. I got those kind of things in front of me here. I'm ready.
So circle in the center, and then make maybe 3-4 circles, and then connect them just so you can write in them. And then the idea is you part of the work of that, because I've worked with so many writers and we have to deliver products so fast, is you just keep doing the hug. So with each word, you give yourself another hug. You don't have to go through the whole rigmarole. But this, again, what you're doing is, in neuro-linguistic programming language, you're anchoring this feeling of happiness, as opposed to all other feelings, if that makes sense. And so, and we're going to use the word of vibrant, because that's a big, that's a beautiful original word that you have in your show. So you and anybody else can write the word vibrant in the middle of that first circle, okay? All right, so now the way that this works is we think about what does vibrant need, get a mental image of vibrant. And because you're my guinea pig, do you mind sharing what comes into your picture mind of the word vibrant?
Sure. First thing that comes is colors, right? Lots of, not specifically a rainbow. They're kind of, for me in this moment anyway, and I live in Hawaii where we have a lot of rainbows, but in this image, they came as like, I don't know, blotches or circles, but just a palette of different colors.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now pick out the color that is the most vibrant in that imaginal thing that you're doing.
Okay.
All right, and now that's what you write in the that's what you write in the first circle. Was it red? Was it green? Whatever it was, write it. And you can tell us as you write it.
Okay, so I write that in one of the external circles?
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, and there's probably a very specific language for this color. I don't know. It was a type of orange. I'm not a color label expert. I appreciate that there are an infinite number of colors, though.
Well, if it was an object, what would it be? This is, again, because remember, this is all about this idea of synesthesia, that we experience things in the creative side on many senses. Is it
okay, sure.
Is it a volcano? Is it a pair of pants?
Well, when you ask the question, the image that came to me is it's like, I don't know if this actually exists, but this is the way it came to me. It's a combination of a top, like a spinning top, and what do you call those things? Like a gyroscope type thing.
Sure.
So it's kind of like a top, and it's spinning, but it's moving three-dimensionally.
Fantastic. So that becomes your second image. That's your second image. Gyrosphere, compass.
All right, I'll call it a gyrotop.
A gyrotop, wonderful. And then now, when you think of the gyrotop, what's the next image that comes in? And again, you know, for people at home, it's good to keep doing the hug, because you're training your mind to associate pleasure with creativity. That's part of this. You know this. You've talked about habits on your shows and stuff like this. This is the way you make a new one. You create a pleasurable outcome, and you repeat it endlessly until it becomes something that you reach for. You create it. So what's the next one that you have?
Okay, cool. The next image that came to me is, gosh, I don't know. I'll have to describe it before I can figure out what the word is, because it's been since I was a kid. When I was a kid, we used to have these, it's kind of like a top, but it's like plastic propeller. And somehow we would take a rubber band and like pull on it or something like that. And that would make this thing go kind of, like a helicopter type of thing.
Wonderful. So we can call that a heligyro, or whatever you'd like it to be.
A heligyro. That's some kind of gyro. All right, I like it.
All right. Now, what's interesting, and I'd like you to notice this, is how the images were perfectly clear and the words were problematic. Now, this is why the word of the day is so useful, because words are problematic. But if you can see it, you will find your way to the proper expression. So so now the next part of the practice is you write a couple of sentences about what you just created. So we're going to do this in the air, and I'm a writer. I'm putting you on the spot. So I'll say what I might have done with your words, and then you'll say what you did. Okay, that way I'm protecting you. Okay, so no one's going to be worse than me, right? So what I saw was I would write, in Hawaii there are many rainbows. When I see this orange rainbow, it reminds me of a time when I was young, and I was with my brother, my lover, my friend, whoever it was, and we would set off these gyro helis with a little rubber band. And there was a time where one went through the air, and I almost hit my grandmother, but she caught it, and she came over and she kissed me, and she said, "You're so lovely."
Beautiful.
Your turn.
Okay, so I'm gonna make up a little, couple of sentences statement. Okay, so, let's see. If I think about a Rorschach test, what comes to me is that life can be full of multicolored clouds that are filled with the brightest orange, so bright and light that it feels like it lifts us up like a gyro heli, revolving us around the center of our hearts like a gyro top.
Whoa! All right. So you can tell that I write narrative fiction and you write spiritual fiction. But when you get the transcript, go look at what you wrote. That was absolutely fantastic.
Well, that was fun. Cool. Thank you. So let's take it a little bit further, though, because, us being writerly types and weirdo wordos, not everybody is wired in the weirdo wordo way, if I can get 4 W's in a row in there. So for a normal person, and even I think you brought it up, like some people got word phobias, right? They've got writing trauma and fears. Totally. How does this work for normal people or people that might have some resistance?
Okay, thank you. You're letting me tell one of my favorite stories. So when I first started, people decided that I could help them with writer's block, and I don't believe in writer's block. I think writer's block comes from not having enough information. I believe it comes from fear. I don't think it had anything to do with actual writing. So what I would do, and this is early precursor to this will make you chuckle, Daniel, early precursor, I would put a little circle on a page and someone would be earnestly telling me all about their writer's block and how they were suffering. And I'd say, oh boy, that is just terrible. I've been there myself. But while we're talking, could you just write a word in this little circle? And of course they'd write a word and I'd say, your problem is not writer's block.
And what kind of response would you get from that?
I would get a laugh. I would, and once in a while someone would get mad at me, but mostly people would laugh. And you tricked me. And I said, I absolutely did. But what was I tricked you into getting real with yourself. What are you afraid of saying, or what don't you know? At that point, because, like you, Daniel, we're both very intuitive people, and you get a sense of, this comes from wisdom, sort of, from being around a lot. I would be able to pretty much figure out, like I did with the lady in Burning Man, kind of what was going on with them, which variation it was. And this is what I do. I would create a little system for them, personalize it. They would get them out of their word. So if I were talking to people that don't think that they're writers or have trouble with it, I'd say, this is a story you're telling yourself, because how many texts do you send today? How many emails do you do? How many shopping lists? This is not the problem. Stop destroying yourself. We're always our own worst enemies. Don't do this. That's not the problem. You write fine. So now do the hug. This would be my prescription. Do the hug and really try to feel some good feelings toward yourself. Like don't just fake it. Just really find a way to like yourself in that minute. And then say, okay, creative subconscious, give me a word that describes the problem I'm actually having. Take a breath and wait, and the weirdest things come in, and immediately you see people's faces. They go, yes, that's it. That's exactly it. And then again, the hard part is that the thing that we all need to do is find a way to accept ourselves. I was at a party and I was talking to some guy and he was having a terrible time. And I said, look, the key here is to accept yourself. I can hear the internal argument. You're terribly angry at your mother. You're not angry at your mother. You're angry at yourself because you've allowed yourself to participate in her movie. Remember, I write screenplays, so it's my right. And he looked at me and he said, "How dare you?" And then he laughed. He seemed to get the laugh, and he just went, "Oh my God." He goes, "I have been feeling so guilty, but that's not why. I'm mad at myself. This happened 2 days ago." I felt like I'd been given the Oscar. I honestly did. When I get a response like that, I am the happiest woman in Europe, because I'm like, yeah, okay, one down, 1% of 1% of the population of the earth. Now I only have to get 799,000 people to wake up. Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. Well, and I want to zoom in for a moment on something you said there and see what you think about this connection. I might be reaching here, though. We've been talking a little bit about writing, the creative process, accessing the subconscious, and ways that relates to living a vibrant, thriving life. And you said something a moment ago about one of the way I heard it anyway. I don't know your exact words, but one of the human struggles, challenges is believing that we are good, that we're good enough, that we're lovable, right? That we're okay.
Yes, that we're enough. That we're enough.
That we're enough. Exactly. Thank you. And and as I reflected on your story about curing that person of writer's block, right? Part of what block is to me is a fear that what's on the inside is not good enough, so we don't want to put it on the outside, right? And I think for me, in my early experience with writing in a very particular format, that there was such an encouragement. And again, what's her name? Julia Cameron, Natalie Goldberg. There were so many great,
all wonderful.
Right, they've just encouraged us, and this was a huge part of my upbringing in this world. Just encourage us to put it all out, right? Don't worry about the quality. Turn off the editor, the critic. Just get the flow going. Absolutely. And when we do that, it not only does it move us out of block, but it starts to teach us that, hey, it's good enough in there. It's good enough that I can put it out there. It's okay.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? Does that make any sense and relate to what you're sharing?
Yeah, but yes, it's 100%, but it's not enough. Otherwise, everybody would be writing, and I'm unhappy about that. And I was absolutely I'm my worst student. That goes without saying. I still am. I have a hard time with myself, but what I understood was we need more specificity. When you're a writer, the more specific you are, the more universal you are, right? That's one of those interesting paradoxical tropes that we get. So here, this was the cure. The cure was not to you see, as soon as you tell people to do something or not do something, you bring up the duality, right? Mm. And the thing about vibrant living, and one of which is I think that what you're up to, Daniel, is so extraordinary, is that vibrant living implies a way of being in the present without having to do this in the now stuff. The in the now stuff is great, but everything implies a duality. This is the problem with language. That's why it's so important to do the word of the day and have the images, because the images are not dualistic. Does that make sense? All language is dualistic. It's the way the structure of the language itself, and that's what we're up against. So to be able to work from this place of presentness, my word, it's not a real word, but it's my word, means that those things, you don't even have to contend with them. I want to go one step beyond this. I don't want to have people to have to go to continue to have this inner conversation with themselves. I want to shut down the conversation and have people just go, word of the day. Okay, look what I wrote. If you look at my website, people come to my webinars. We do the practice. People write the most beautiful poems, extraordinary paragraphs. They reveal things. It's not even really the them that they know. It's this other part of them that is just, as you say, fluid, is just there. So the key, I hope I'm answering, and one of the things I love on your show is that you're always going there, whether you say it or not, is you have to get past the mental construct of everything in order to be creative. As soon as vibrant is one of those rare words that doesn't imply its opposite. There aren't very many, if you think about it, but vibrant is just a brilliant word, because when you're vibrant, you're so busy saying the word, you can't think of anything else. It's like your rainbows. And that's the thing about vibrant living, is to be in that space where you can only be in one space at a time. But if you're aware that there's another space, you've already defeated the whole process.
Beautiful. Okay. So clearly a wise member of our audience, or we could say the wise viewer and or listener, will clearly want to ASAP get a hold of the Word of the Day book. How do they do that?
At the moment, you would go to Amazon and you would order it from Amazon.
Okay. And did I get the title right? Is it called, what's the official title, the full title?
This is good because this is tricky. It is called Word of the Day, Transform Your Writing in 15 Minutes a Day. It's not called The Word of the Day. If you try to find the Word of the Day, it will take you to various dictionaries and thesauruses. So it's Word of the Day with no the.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. And so great. And then you want to tell us a little bit, because you just had 2 books come out like in very close proximity. What's the deal? So clearly we have a sense now of word of the day, not the word of the day, word of the day, right? And I love that you got the word transform in there also. So we've got a good sense of that book. Will you tell us about the other?
Yeah, the other book, and as I said, I mentioned that I have sort of a larger mission, and the mission is that I've just created this company, and what we do is we provide people with the tools to make themselves happy and to keep themselves happy, because that's the hard part. You go to a workshop, wherever you feel great, and then 2 days later, this practice of the self-acknowledgement hug keeps you in that serotonin space for as much as often as you want to. The other book is a curious story where I had consulted with a psychic a couple of times over the last 20 years, and we clicked, and it was very nice, and I'd speak to him once a year or whatever. And then he retired, and I get an email from him a few years ago saying, "Oh, hi, Marilyn, are you still writing? My spiritual guides would like me to work with you once a week." Unheard of. It would take you, 8 months to get an appointment with this guy, maybe once a year. He delivered his amazing stuff, clairvoyant. So he got everything. He got the dead people. He got the future. He was a bag of chips, like they say. All this in a bag of chips. He was that. And I had been in therapy for 17 years at that point. I was completely disillusioned, and I thought, oh my God, if this could only help me. I was going through a divorce and other stuff. I said, thank you. You're like a lifeline. And so, and also, as I say, he and I had always clicked. He'd run a New Age bookstore in Australia, where he's from, and he was very, very like-minded. And after a year, I finally began to understand that when he would give the messages, because the way it would work is he'd say, "Here's an opportunity to have a conversation with your guides." The guides speak to me, I speak to you. I realized that he was half here and half there. He was sort of blended. And so he heard some of what he said, but he never really got to hear kind of the really good stuff that was coming out. And I thought, what a nice thing. I'll transcribe our meetings, and I'll clean them up and edit them, and I'll send them to him as a gift. So I took a year's worth, and I did that. And I gave each message a title and the date, and I sent them to him. And what we got back was, "Well, Marilyn, now you know why they want you to work with him. We want you to make this book." So it was like a setup from the guides already, if you believe in things like this. And so 3 years later, the book is now available on Amazon. It's 3 years of the teachings. Now, they're not they're not about the minutia of my life, because the way it would work is he'd give me a message from the guides, 3 pages worth or 2 pages, and then he would say questions. And that was the cue that I cut off when I took these things, because the rest of the stuff was, do I sell this house? Do I trust this person? It was the usual stuff that was of no interest. But these were these profound things, and they covered the gamut. They were about identity, the world beyond, the truth about how time works, how to invest your money, how to buy real estate, how to get along with your mate, how to forgive yourself. I mean, fantastic things. And, finally, when I got the book all organized, that's when it was revealed to me that that's why the guides had put him with me. They didn't bother to tell him either, by the way. He was as surprised as I was. So that was interesting. And, I'm a believer. I'm not a believer. I'm a storyteller. So, I have a sort of a different orientation, but I'll tell you a true story. This is quite a good one. So, my father died, and I was with him when he died. And my father had something called sepsis, and it made him incoherent, and he sort of babbled at me for a half hour and was very earnest. And I tried to, understand the subtext of what he was saying. But he and I had a bad fight just before he died. And when he was talking at me, I was a bad girl. I said, Dad, this is not going to get you into heaven. And I was pretty annoyed. So he dies. I feel really horrible. But that night, I happened to have my annual session with Martin. This is about 10 years ago. I get on the phone. There's no way Martin could know this. I don't think Martin even knew I had a father. He goes, the guides want you to know that your father was not trying to get into heaven. How could he know that? I mean, and I can tell you 10 other stories, but that was a big one.
Well, so I'm sure that's not the only time you've had that kind of, how could they know that experience? And that's of particular interest to me, and I'll tell you why in a moment. what happened for you? What happens in that moment? Like you just had a physical movement from that. What's the process? What happened in you when he said something that he couldn't have known?
Well, what can I tell you? I'm a Sag, so I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna be like, hey, let's party. My nature is to celebrate. An event like that is so much fun. It was like, wow, that's so cool. And of course, the fact that my father was really sincerely apologizing to me and not trying. I mean, there's no doubt that Martin was telling me, because how else? I mean, it was clear that this was an act of mercy from whether it came from whatever it was, whether I made it up, whether it came. This was an act of mercy because I felt so bad about being mean to him in that moment,
Hmm.
and I was forgiven and I was freed.
Yeah, beautiful.
I mean, so I cried and then I drank a glass of champagne. I mean, I was like, wow.
Perfect.
Because I felt, I mean, Jen, you know how these things are. You feel blessed. You suddenly feel like you're in a column of golden light with that orange color in your cluster. You just feel like you've been given the spotlight for a second. They noticed you up there. Whatever that means.
Yeah, well, a couple things that I take from that. One is, it sounds like for you the shock of it wasn't the fact that here's this unexplainable thing happen. You're kind of used to that, I think. It was more the reprieve or the forgiveness or the freedom, which to me goes right back to part of what you were saying earlier about in the early process of the word of the day. If we can, when we create that self-love and maybe part of that, at least in the way I work, is also forgiveness, right? Then there's this freedom that comes, and that's what it sounds like happened for you in the midst of that.
Yeah, but I have to tell you, I was pretty shocked. No, honestly, things like that don't happen that often. I'm sorry, I don't care how good you are. That's pretty amazing. That was a shocker on that level as well. Like, how could you know that? You really must be psychic.
Yeah, well, and so I mean, the other thing that brings to mind for me, there's a story that a lot of people know, some don't. So I'll tell a real brief version of it. One of my teachers, heroes, friends, a guy named Ram Dass.
Oh, of course, be here now.
Right. So yeah, he was originally famous in the West for this book, Be Here Now. Prior to that, though, he was a professor at Harvard, got fired from Harvard. His mother died. He went off in search of the meaning of life, and he goes to India. And, this whole long process, and he ends up at an ashram with a guru. And he's thinking to himself, like, come on, man, I was just a Harvard professor. And he sees people like bowing down and touching the guru's feet. And he's like, I don't know about this stuff. And then when he meets the guru one-on-one the next day, and the guru says something to him that no one else could have known, similar to what you had with Martin there. Yeah. And that moment for Ram Dass, at that point, his name was Richard Albert. That moment, it like blew his mind. It pulled a string that unwound some sense for him of reality, and also some sense of limitations. So that's what I'm reminded of as you speak that. And it sounds like maybe that's part of what can occur for people through the book. Does that sound true?
Well, this is that. Thank you. That story about Ram Dass is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that story. I didn't know the story. The answer is that the book is the compendium of all those years of wisdom. And when you read the introduction, the introduction is written by the guide. You have to be in the mood for this book. I mean, it's first of all, it's 535 pages, and you can use it to hold your door open. But the guides deliver a message through Martin when I was writing about this book, and they describe Martin. I mean, you really have to be there. I mean, it's a thing. Now, at the time when this happened about my dad, I didn't know. I mean, like now Martin and I know each other, but Martin was sort of this, it was an anomalous force. One of my students would buy me a session with Martin as a gift every year. That's how I ever met him. So this was maybe the 5th session I'd ever had with him. So, I may be more used to him now, but at the time I was blown away. I really was. This is creepy. This is eerie. This is otherworldly. There's no explanation for this. And then like Ram Dass, I was just like, okay, this is a demonstration of being connected to some kind of a larger force. And that made me happy because, obviously wounded healers make the best teachers, right? So who was the person who needed to find a way to have a decent relationship with themselves the most? You got it. And I felt so lonely, and this is a longer story. I felt so cut off from spirituality. I felt so abandoned. And so when this happened, I haven't even thought about it until you were asking me the question. I realized that was when I regained my faith in that moment. I always had a working level of faith because I always felt, unlike most people, that faith was a tool of something you needed to be able to make sure that your upper GPS was working, so you'd find the parking spaces and stuff like that, but not at this level. So I'm going to cry now. I'm going to try not to cry. But yes, that was the moment when I really plugged into spirit.
Yeah, well, that's beautiful. And thank you for sharing that. And to me, that's one of the greatest liberations that any of us can have is a moment of realizing that there is more, that there is that which is beyond us. I know for me, that was 100% life-changing in the first time I realized that.
Well, when did you realize it? You told me Ram Dass's, but you didn't tell me yours.
Well, I'd be happy to share the story with you, and it's a long story, and we are unfortunately almost to the end of our time, so we'll pause that one for now. And let me ask you this, though, because I have a sneaky suspicion that you came to this party with a gift in hand. Is that true? Is it accurate that you have a gift for our audience?
I do.
Okay.
And the gift is as follows. The way that I think it's clear that what I'm trying to do is I would like to get that 1% of the world population, which is 800,000 people, to start to experience this and change their relationship with themselves and the world. Can you imagine if we got 800,000 people to get up in the morning in bed and say, I love you, I'll always be together, and you are enough. And then have a little moment of creativity where you make up a word in a story. The world could be a very different place. So the way that I would love to have this happen would be for people to sign up for the newsletter where they get all kinds of prompts and articles and stuff. And then if they find something they like, to share it, because I say each time we get someone to do it, it cuts down my task list, which is right now is 799,000 people. And anybody who signs up for the website will get a copy of the free book.
Okay, well, that's amazing. So
wait, I had a good idea. If you will email me at horowitz.marilyn@gmail.com, you can tell me which book you would like. You can pick either.
Oh, look at that. Okay, so let's make it clear, and let's make it especially clear even for those who are listening and not viewing. So if you're viewing, you can see Marilyn's website, which is marilynhorowitz.com, and I'll spell that for you in a moment. So one option is to just go to Marilyn's site, and you can opt in for her newsletter, and that will get you a copy of the Word of the Day book. However, bonus time, if you email Marilyn directly, which is horowitz.marilyn@gmail.com, you can say which book you would prefer. Either of her new books, she will get to you free of charge. That's amazing. So, and then let me spell out both of those words, and they go in different orders depending on which way you are going here. The website is Marilyn, Marilyn, Horowitz, which is HOROWITZ.com. And those words are spelled the same way, but in reverse. If you're going to email her, it's horowitz.marilyn@gmail.com. I bet you know how to spell Gmail already. So awesome. That's a beautiful gift. Thank you so much, Marilyn. And for outside of that, for anybody in our audience that would love to connect with you more, what's the best way? Should they go to your site, or is there another way you prefer?
No, as I say, that if you go to my site, please sign up for the newsletter. But if you just want to connect to me, you can. There's a contact form there. or you can email me at this email. Just put Richard Aaron, put Daniel Aaron in the subject header, and I will open it quickly.
Awesome. Thank you. Cool. Well, I think that brings us along, sadly, to our final question. It's a great question, though. It's the big question. It's so big, it's actually impossible. And I say that because you've got a tremendous amount of wisdom and experience. And now I am asking you to distill it, to reduce it, to boil it down to just one thing. So if you had just one thing to say to help people to create their most vibrant, thriving life, what is it? What's the one thing?
The answer is to get up in the morning and tell yourself you love yourself and that you're enough, and make it your intention to cultivate unconditional self-acknowledgement, which is self-acceptance without a but after it. Just be willing to be who you are to yourself and not have an argument about it. And then fix what you can fix and accept what you can't fix. That would be my one thing.
I love it. That is fantastic. So super cool. Marilyn, thank you for not just for being here. That's great. I appreciate that. Also, though, for you following the nudges of spirit all along the way through your path, through the work you've done, the creations you've put out into the world, for creating yourself into such a masterpiece of value and sharing that with us here today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Back at it, okay?
And y'all, our audience, amazing, amazing people. You not only interested in vibrant living, you're doing something about it. You're rewiring your brain in this moment. Again, please take that also into some action, some experiment, play with it, act upon it in your life. And again, I so appreciate that you're here. Thank you for being with us. I love you. I appreciate you. See you soon. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.